So I created a new project on 4.25, and usually what I go to is the Games tab and then third person. Why third person? Because you get a character, but you can check the scaling of your assets and, well, your character too, so that everything matches up. I mean, first person is pretty cool too, though. Next is naming the project. One of the first things you're gonna be confused about when naming things in Unreal Engine is when there's a space. This is for all naming stuff. Like, you can't have a space. But what you can do is put an underscore, and that acts as a space. That's just one weird thing to get used to. You get used to it. I don't touch any of these other options. Not even ray tracing yet. Okay, now that we have the project started and it's compiling stuff, the first thing we're going to look at is not the project. So here's the library tab in the project launcher, and it's got where it holds all of your projects and stuff. But most importantly, here's all the different add-on stuff that you're going to find yourself getting on the marketplace. And it'd be really nice to have a folder system for all this epic. But anyways, when it comes to getting assets, well, first of all, you're in luck. Unreal Engine holds free assets every month. Alright, I wanted to mention something else, and it's that if you put in Epic Games in the marketplace and then click on their tag, you actually can find a lot more of the free stuff that they're providing, like the Infinity Blade stuff, the Paragon characters, and Paragon environment stuff. Even the older demos that they have that don't show up in the Learn tab anymore, like Soul City and Soul Cave. But another thing you can do is if you go into the Learn tab, these are all different projects that you can load up yourself in Unreal Engine. Like, this is how you can learn the sequencer by kind of deconstructing what they did with it, or even for the Infiltrator demo. And the best part about this is that you can use all the assets that are in these demos. Now, the way to do that, and this works for assets that are incompatible for like 4.25, but work on 4.24. So you go into the file system, and then you go into your projects, and let's see here, let's take from the persona thing. You go into content, and then sure, let's take a few things that I think are pretty darn useful. You can copy that and paste it into, let's just do this one. Paste it right in here, and it'll all work. And this is also a good way to get incompatible engine version files from one project into the other and bypass that. Now back to the project at hand. Clearly we're not going to be making a third person thing here, but you can stick with this map for testing and such. But when you want to actually make the map, you usually go to new level and you load default or time of day. Time of day has this really cool new like planetary atmosphere system, but we're totally not ready for that yet. We're going to go with default, and now we're just going to start learning what we're looking at here. Okay, first order of business, now that we have a new map, let's save the current as something. And let's just call it tutorial, because that's a tutorial. Yes, tutorial, because that sounds funner. I usually rename the maps that I enter on, because if you load up a default map just to try out something, but then you already have your entire level created on the default map, it's just, Unreal Engine doesn't like that. You know, just name your maps, people. First order of business is moving all these tabs around. Unreal Engine's quite flexible, so look at these world settings. And then detail settings. Let me just pop those out. So, all this stuff can be moved anywhere, even over to here. And it's kind of just like Blender, except even more flexible. If you want it to become a tab, sure. If you want it to be highly unusable in a weird spot, sure. But my personal settings, are always going to be just like MMM's setup or any video editor, where all the properties are on the left with the viewport on the right like this. Another important thing is these golden triangles. When you click on those, you're going to have these tabs pop up. And you can hide them as an option. If you right click, you can hide the tab, and that's what creates those triangles. Very useful for cleaning up your workstation and stuff like that. Now, when it comes to sequencer, this isn't here initially. In fact, you get what's here. So in order to bring in new windows, you go to Window and then Cinematics, and Sequencer is right there. I just noticed now that I just totally moved this toolbar way out of position. Here we go. Super easy. So first step is to just get comfortable with where you want your things. We've got the outliner just like Blender. We've also got Content Browser, and then placing actors and stuff. So let's start delving into what we're looking at. Let's start with the Content Browser. It seems pretty simple, you know, different folders and stuff. But then, like, hey, what if I wanted to get like a tree of the folders? You click this over here, and you can see the different trees of different things. And say I don't like where this tutorial built data is, and I want it to be over in like geometry. You can move it there or copy it there or whatever. But then say I was an idiot and I was like, wait, maybe I should just make my own map folder for that. Alright, then go back to content, right click, new folder, and we'll call it tutorial underscore map. Yeah, even the whole space thing doesn't work in naming folders here. And because it's awkward to try and grab this and then try to use this, because this isn't working, right? You need the tree in order to really move things around. There it is. You can use the scroll wheel while holding it to go up and down. Okay, so this is the paths view. This here is the collections view. At first I didn't get it, but once you click the plus sign, local collection, sure. Think of it as a favorites folder in which that's just changing the size of that. Alright. And in which, say we have a favorite kind of cube. We go into here first, load up this area, and then we drag it over the favorites. And now we can kind of like stockpile a bunch of our favorite meshes into a favorites folder, which is kind of cool. Very useful for cleaning up things instead of having to search all around in the content folder. And you can manage where it is with this new pop-up in the options, remove from favorites, manage in collections, stuff like that. I'm definitely going to use that in the future. Completely forget. Next up in the content browser is the filters. This I use a ton. So say we have the meshes in here, but then like you have a whole bunch of meshes down the line. It's like, I don't know what folder it is in. So let's see. Static meshes. So this pulls up all the static meshes all the way down from this folder. So if I go to content, it's going to pull up all the static meshes below this parent folder. And you can do this for particle systems. I misclicked. You can do this for particle systems or materials, and this is very useful for getting around and making sure that you get through the content browser super quick. So a little tip about this save all button. This saves all the modified assets in the content browser, but it doesn't save any editing to the scene or anything like that. If you want to do that, you want to do save all up here. That saves all unsaved levels, literally everything. While this is just all the assets in the content folder. And then we've got import, which we will mess with later on. And sequencer is blank right now until we add in a cinematic like level sequence or master sequence, which we'll get to later. Next up is the outliner, which is like any other outliner really, where you can adjust like what you see here with the right click. I don't remember doing that. The outliner is pretty easy to use. You can drag the different columns, adjust the columns to be nothing, which is nice, and then you can create a folder see, let's call this lighting. And then start clicking all these. So, yeah, and then we drag into lighting, which really cleans up the outliner. The thing is, when you have too many items, and you're dragging something from the content browser, or you're trying to drag this up to a folder that's way up here because you have so many items, there's no like moving up to the top of this and then it would automatically scroll. No, you gotta hold the mouse down and you gotta scroll it yourself. Ugh. That's the most exhausting thing I probably do in Unreal Engine. And over here on the left, place actors. Basic, you've got the basic cube that you can place in there. You've got the point light. This is all basic stuff, but not everything is underneath this. Even in lights, it's got the basic lights, but not everything. Cinematic, basic camera stuff. Like, this is the basic camera, but the sequencer spawns with a button. And then visual effects as well. Geometry, this is useful for crafting your levels. So say we have a box. This is for really fast creation, and if you want to create a box that removes from another box, you click the subtract button down here, and it works as so. Very great for building blocks when starting off with level building. And then volumes, now this one's actually a lot more complete than the other ones. Now when it comes to like all classes and stuff, this is where all of your like hidden stuff is going to be. Like, did we see decal around? No, we didn't, even though it's incredibly important for putting posters on a wall or completely retexturing a wall. And then there's also like empty ponds, a whole bunch of other stuff that was not in there. Even a physics thruster, where the fuck was that? You know? We need better tabs for this stuff. There's a bunch of extra stuff in here if it's awesome. When you download the mods or unlock the plugins for it. Even third-person character, just pop down another character. I didn't know that existed until today. Moving on. We've got world settings. This is usually meant for, well, the entire world scene. Do I mess with this often? No. Whenever I come in here, I usually mess with the gravity. Moving on, we've got the details. The details panel changes based on what you click, but it holds all the different options that you can use to adjust its settings. Now let's get on to the viewport. So how to move around in the viewport is we've got right click, which looks the camera around, pitches and rotates it. And then we've got left click, which, yeah, sure you can click on the objects, but if you hold it down, you can move it forward and walk around like this, which is very useful for staying on a plane. Now what I just did there is I held left click and I held right click at the same time. And you can pan the camera from anywhere you are. Very nice. You can actually do this with the middle mouse button too, which is usually used for panning, if you're used to that, but I prefer, holding left mouse and right mouse button. Next up is my favorite way to get around is holding the right mouse button, and then using WASD to fly the camera around, which can be sped up or slowed down with the mouse wheel. Very nice. And that is not even where it ends. So I usually use F to focus the camera on an object. And then if you hold Alt, and then you can use the left mouse button to move around like it's Blender or Maya on the object. In fact, the right mouse button zooms in and out. You don't even have to look at that. You can zoom in and out with the right mouse button and dragging around and holding Alt with this too. So work with control? No, it doesn't. Shift? No changes. So now let's look into what these different gizmos are. So of course we have the transforming gizmos, like this arrow here and here. But the cool things are the little squares that stick out of the arrows. Like if you click this, you can move along the 2 different axes. And they've got that for each different angle. Very nice. But then you can also use this little ball in the center to go based on where your camera viewpoint is, which has been super useful for me when it comes to that huge island, because going like this, you don't know where that box is going to end up once it gets to this point because of perspective. But using this, it's just like, oh, it's going to end up right around where I just placed it, and then it's great for moving stuff for far distances when you move the camera super far away. So now we've got the rotate tool. Very simple to use, very obvious, very nice. And then scaling, which also has the similar like scale from 2 axis bar thing here. And then scale from the center. What this box is, it's usually either a world icon, scaling. It's either a world icon or a local icon. So what is the difference? Let's go to rotate real quick. So when it's on the worldo, it's always going to be focusing on the grid-based world location of the axis. So if I were to rotate this right now, then it would still be focusing on the world axes. But if I switch to local, then it moves with the object. By the way, really nice shortcut for moving, rotation, and scaling is W, E, and R. Another thing here is we've got the translate. So these 3 orange ones are actually snapping tools. So if we were to get really close, we'd see that this is kind of snapping rigidly along some kind of invisible grid. If we turn that off, then it's start moving smoothly. And it's the same for rotation as well. If we turn it off, it's nice and smooth. Turn it on, it snaps. This is very useful for keeping your levels and designs, like when you're building a building, you don't want things to be all over the place. You can also hold Alt and drag an arrow or rotate to duplicate your objects. But then we've got camera. So when you use the mouse wheel to move the camera, you're adjusting with the speed scalar. You're not adjusting the general camera speed. So if I was to do this and start moving, I can use the mouse wheel to kind of rotate it up, but it only goes up a certain amount. But if we go to like 8, oh, here we go. Yeah, sometimes my assets actually do send me out this far for no reason whatsoever. So if I ever need to get back to the zone, I usually click something that's inside there and I press F. And I'm back in. And it's still going extremely fast. I need to set this, roll the mouse wheel down. Okay. So the further top right, I've never clicked this button because that's very confusing. I mean, I get that it's orthographic views from the different areas, but it's also in wireframe, and it's like, I don't want to deal with that. So, top left, we've got show. Now, this is stuff that you can experiment with on your own, but usually it's like, if you want to see different things in the viewer, that, yeah, you can just toggle hiding stuff. Very useful for post-processing, like motion blur and stuff. You want to take that off if you're doing stepped animation. Anyways, on to the next thing, lit. I adjust this quite a bit. I go through these. So, lit has the full performance, like sucking lighting going on. And if you ever have like a huge like mountain and you're just losing frame rate, then you can switch to unlit, and all the lighting stuff is taken away, and you get some serious like frame boost from this. Then brush wireframe, don't use it. Detail lighting, very useful for, well, I mean, this whole area is pretty much white already, but it's great for looking at like ambient occlusion and trying to figure out where those are. Good for adjusting your shadows in a scene. Lighting only is the same kind of thing, but literally only lighting. Reflections. Here you can realize that literally every object in the entire world has reflections. Cool. Looks a little weird. And then these other ones I don't really use. Not even the visualizers or the LOD. But this last one, say your camera is in a really dark area, and then you look into a bright area, or you go into a dark area, and then the lighting is randomly changing on you. That would be called exposure. And this is what it usually looks like. When it's set to game settings, that's usually set to automatic on. But you can turn it off here and then set it to like 0 or something that's consistent so that it's not like the lighting's not constantly changing on you, whether you go from a dark to a light place. Now then, we've got perspective. This one's a little more obvious. You know, you got the top perspective of the map. Then we got bottom, right, back. But what's most interesting is the cinematic viewport, where right here there's going to be like information on where you are in the scene, and then you're going to have like toolbar, play button, and all this and that. Let's just load up a cinematic real quick. Add level sequence, whatever. And this is what it looks like. It brings this into here, and you've got the play range. Really cool up here. You can get a grid, so you can get the perfect artist like setup for your scenes, like having a person over here and over there. Even like different layer box masks and stuff like that is really nice cinematic viewport. I usually stick to the default. I usually stick to the default because it's very clean. Last up is this arrow. So real time. So you have particle effects or fire going on in the scene, and it's like really freaking annoying. You just turn it off real quick, and it will turn on. It will stop time pretty much. Show stats. Oh, I didn't know that. Alright, so show stats and whatever. Now show FPS, I put up all the time. Look at that FPS. That's really nice. At the top right, it tells you if you're doing good or not. Really useful. Field of view plane is for your current camera. Just lower that a ton. Or maybe raise it a ton. Ludicrous speed. Far view plane. Don't know what that is. Screen percentage. Yeah, that's your resolution, actually. That one I do know what it is. So notice how everything suddenly looks like crap. Very useful for adjusting and trying to figure out. Never mind, it's not that useful. No. Screen percentage, great for checking resolution stuff. Now, allow cinematic control. That one allows matinee sequence previews to play in the viewport. It always on. Most important stuff. Game view. So, you see all these floating bobs and bits. And the camera is like, sometimes when you have a full scene, it's like, man, that's a lot of shit in my way. So, game view automatically will hide that stuff. So we can get a very clear experience. And the shortcut for this is G. Now in the sequencer I usually had to swap between G on and off again and again, but recently they added where once you press play it automatically hides that stuff for you, and once you stop playing it unhides it. Super nice. And then we've got Immersive Mode, which is a full screen mode in which you get to go to Snip and Sketch, New, and then take a screenshot of your project without having huge file sizes. Speaking of screenshots, we have high resolution screenshot, which turns all the render settings to full and takes a screenshot of where your camera currently is. I've never gone past 3 because it crashes my system. And being in immersive mode does change it. So if you were in immersive mode, the high resolution screenshot will change to a much bigger version of the file where it's full screen. But if you're not, then it's going to take a screenshot based on this window. Bookmarks. Excuse me? What is this? Alright, so say I just set a bookmark. Okay, jump to bookmark 0. Oh my god, how did I not use this before? What the... That's really cool. Create camera here, I usually press create camera in the sequencer, which we'll get to another time. Layouts, don't even touch. Advanced settings, well, you can tell I definitely don't touch, but you can adjust how you go through the viewport with these options. So it's nice to have all these different options here. Now then, at the top we have save the current level, which, as you just saw, this little star thing is in the level, but it just wasn't saved at all. Like, it saves what's going on in the editor, but it does not save the assets. This saves the assets. And again, if you think, wow, that's really stupid, then just do save all up here. Or Control-Shift-S. I do that all the damn time. Source control, that's for, honestly, co-oping with other people. Then we have modes. Now this is where you have your landscape modes, your, wow, I really screwed up where I placed all that. So let's put that here. And the mode toolbar, I remember being moved to here. Hide that shit. Okay. Now that I have restored sanity, so modes, we're going to go through these in a bit. And then we've got foliage, nice. All the different settings were moved to here. Brush editing, don't know how to use. Mesh painting, I saw that being used by the Quixel guy. I've got to learn this. Now, I've been using 4.25, but I had to build it from source, which is like a GitHub open source version of the engine. I don't recommend building from source just for this when you're just learning. But I wanted to check out the fracture stuff from Chaos Destruction, and that's why I went through a huge process building from source. Anyways, contents, that's just the content browser. Marketplace, ooh, is this just a quick shortcut to the marketplace? Yeah, but you don't really need to click that. Let's see, settings. Alright, so this is actually in the same thing as the edit configuration. Same stuff here. Oh, but it does not have the editor preferences. Okay. Okay. The thing to keep track of here is your settings for engine scalability. And this is stuff that to test out the different levels. So if I set this to low, then the scene is going to change, the shadows are going to change to be based on a computer that's low on hardware and stuff. Great for testing. Next up is the play button. Now this has a few options, but the main ones I usually pay attention to: selected viewport, so that when I hit play, obviously it plays in the viewport like everything else. But then you can also hit simulate, and then this will allow you to fly the camera around and see if different effects and stuff in the sequencer are actually working. The fire effects in my Diane video would not work until simulate was going, for example. It automatically plays if you swap them. What if I right click? No, nope. Alright, so current camera location. I like that because say you wanted to test things out over here. Never mind. That usually works better in first person because it'll drop the first person exactly where you are rather than moving all the way over to where this blueprint is and forcing the camera to be where this one. Then these other ones I don't mess with. Launch, definitely don't mess with since I'm not really launching anything on any consoles. Last but not least, we got file. Here, this is going to be some important stuff. So, say you wanted to export this to Blender, and I want to hit caps lock to select everything rather than shift. So, you would select that, you go to export selected, and you don't want to export FBX, but rather OBJ, because Blender reads that a lot better. And then you want to like save that to wherever your projects are, and say yes to exporting materials, just in case you have like a door stuff. Blender will get about a quarter of the materials right, and it will get all of your trees wrong. But it's useful for exporting objects into Blender so that you can get the scaling right in Blender first. Let's see here, edits. So plugins. I'm not going to get into editor preferences or project settings, but well, actually, project settings does have one important thing. And under maps and modes, you can set your starting map for when you first start the project, so that, yeah. Now plugins, this is where a bunch of hidden yet awesome stuff is going to be, and they'll never tell you about it. For example, Take Recorder and Text 3D is currently in here. A lot of different awesome plugins are hidden in here, kind of like the stuff that's turned off in Blender until you go in and turn it on. It's like, oh, that's a cool thing to add to the project. Highly worth just checking this out. But a lot of your marketplace add-ons, some are probably going to require plugins, and then they're going to place all the plugins in here, and then you go in and you can activate, restart the editor, and it'll be activated. Other than plugins, we've got Camera Shake Previewer, which I don't know how to use that yet. That's brand new. Editor modes, I missed the old editor menu. And then different layouts. And other help, that's general help stuff. I think that's the general gist of the interface so far and how to get around it. And my understanding of it. Other than like the properties panel over here, generally you're going to hide a lot of this stuff. And properties panel stuff is something we'll just have to go through step by step, or